Learning a language is always challenging, and we can reduce the challenge if we know the ins and outs of that particular language, and also we know the process to internalize that language, and this will help us to carry on that language, to become more competent in communicating that language if we understand how it works and what will happen if we do not follow the process or procedures. And one of the procedures is called interlanguage. And today we will be discussing interlanguage in this video, and the topic is set as interlanguage, second language learner's language. So we are talking about a language which a second language learner produce whenever they are trying to learn another language, which we refer as target language. For example, I'm a Bangla language speaker or Bangla language user, or Bangla is my mother tongue, and I'm trying to learn English language. So English is my target language, Bangla is my L1, English can be considered as my L2, and while developing my knowledge on English language, the language I will develop in between will be referred as interlanguage. But do not worry much if you don't understand yet, because we have a long narration to give you a detail on interlanguage. And the information here were taken from Rod Ellis, Muriel Sevel-Choke, Korean Bato, and other sources. And these slides are prepared by me, that is Mohammad Nasir Bedros, and I will also be here as your narrator of this particular slides or video. So let's start with our contents. So what will be our contents? So here are our contents. We will be talking about interlanguage. We will be talking about characteristics of interlanguage or the features of interlanguage. We will also talk about the processes in interlanguage, and the fossilization. So we'll know fossilization, what is fossilization and how fossilization works with that. But before starting with interlanguage, I should tell you that this particular topic is a successor of second language acquisition. Whenever you will be trying to acquire a different language rather than your first language or mother tongue, the issues will be there, and one of the issues is interlanguage. So we would like to know about this topic. So let's start with the first one, interlanguage. So what is interlanguage? Let's know about it. Interlanguage refers to the structured system which the learner constructs at any given stage in his or her development. Okay, let me draw a line, then you might understand. For example, you are here and your term is L1, that means your first language, and you want to be in here, and here you will find L2 or TL or target language. So that is your target, that's where you will go. So your level of language is in here and you want to be there. So here is L1, here is L2. But we are talking about whenever you are developing, you are performing, you are trying to learn, and you pass these stages, these 1, 2, 3, there are some stages in this, and you pass these stages. So we are talking about a language which you develop in between in here. That is what we are referring as IL or interlanguage. So it is not L1, it is not L2, rather it is a mixture between L1 and L2. So you can develop this language in between with that. So that is what we are referring as interlanguage. So that is what is referring in here. Interlanguage refers to the structured system. So definitely it is structured which the learner constructs at any given stage in his or her development. So you are here the learner and you can develop interlanguage in any of these stages. So you can develop it in your learning stage. So this is your learning stages, and any of these stages you can develop IL or interlanguage. So according to Selinker, who introduced the term interlanguage, and he said that the intermediate states of a learner's language as it moves towards the target language. So we are talking about the intermediate states or the interim grammars. So the rules, the knowledge, the grammars the learner developed before achieving target language competence. And this interlanguage is also known as approximative systems, developed by Nimson in 1971, and idiosyncratic dialects and transitional competence, and developed by Coder in 1971. So all are same: approximative systems, idiosyncratic dialects and transitional competence, and interlanguage all are similar. So the concept, so what do we understand? It is the assumptions underlying interlanguage theory recorded by Nimson 1971. And what he said is that first, at any given time, the approximative system is distinct from L1 and L2. That's what we said in the earlier slide, that interlanguage is another language which is a mixture of L1 and L2. So it is not L1, it is not L2, rather it is a different system which we refer as approximative system. So it is distinct, it is different than L1 and L2. The approximative systems form an evolving series. Yes, this system is form an evolving series. That means you will be evolved, your knowledge of that language, of the target language, will be evolved, will be changed. In a given context situation, the approximative systems of learners at the same stage of proficiency roughly coincide. So that means, for example, your level is let me give you, so you are here L1 and you want to be there in target language and you are trying to develop. So after every section, after every input, you are developing and you are moving towards the target language. So what will happen in any given context or context situation, your interlanguage as will be, and your competency level will be coincide. It will be in the same side, it will be developing. Your proficiency level is developing and your target language and your proficiency level, those both will be coincide, both will be staged together. So we can say that interlanguage is a creative process driven by inner forces in interaction with environmental factors and influenced by both L1 and by L input from the target language. So it will be developing and considering the interaction and considering the other environmental factors and the influence, and there will be the influence from L1 and input from target language. So it will be dependent how much input are you getting from target language, and of course as it will make a distinction, it will compare your first language as well, and all these things will be influenced whenever you will be developing your interlanguage. And the emphasis is on the interlanguage itself as a third language, as we say that it is not L1, it is not L2, rather it will be developing a different language. So it is a third language system in its own right. It is a third language system because sometimes it will have L1 or sometimes it will have L2. Sometimes it will follow the rules of L1, sometimes it will follow the rules of L2. Sometimes the interlanguage, the users of interlanguage will create another one. And of course, I would like to inform another thing is that, for example, me Nasim can develop an interlanguage, and you X can be developed another interlanguage, and another Y can develop another interlanguage. So that means every learner can possibly develop a new interlanguage, which can be variable, which can be different from me or from other learners. So every individual learner can different individual interlanguage. So what are the features of an interlanguage? First, it can be systematic. That means, of course, there are systems in there. So interlanguage is governed by rules, we know that, which constitute the learner's internal grammar. So the learner's grammar will be changed, will be developed by some rules. So the learner will follow some rules in there, and those rules, if you try to discover those rules, you will be analyzing the language that particular language learner developed during developing target language competence. So that is why it is referred as systematic. Dynamic, that means it is changing. The system of rules which learners have in their minds changes frequently. For example, I develop a rule like we have to use so as. We can use so as at the beginning of a sentence, but later from another input I came to know that it can be different, so I change my rule. So that is how interlanguage rules can be changed. Selinker views this change not as steady progression along with continuum, but discontinuous progression. So of course it can be different as well. As Selinker says that the change may not be a steady progression. That means I have developed the knowledge, that's why I have changed this one. But you can say that it can be changed in opposite section as well. For example, I might develop a wrong rule in there, so which can be referred as discontinuous progression. So maybe I did not develop the language, I had lack of knowledge of the target language, I did not continue to learn about the target language. So that is the time the change can be happen as well. Variable, although the interlanguage is systematic, differences in context result in different patterns of language use. So based on the context, the individual learners can be resulted in different patterns of language use. So maybe in one context they use one categorical knowledge of that particular language, that is target language, and that can be different in different contexts. For example, I am using one internalized system, that is one of my interlanguages in one context, maybe in my home. That can be different when I will use it in my school or in my college or in my university, or maybe in a shop, or maybe in a country where English is used as native language. Radio system both in form and function. So it is another feature of interlanguage. That means there will be less complex grammatical structures. So the interlanguage user, he or she will be try to develop a structure which is less complex comparing to the target language. That means he or she can omit the inflections such as the past tense suffix in English as well. So he or she might not use the suffixes like as I say work and then worked, the past form of work. So I might omit the suffix in there. That means ed. And the smaller range of communicative needs if the learner is still in contact with members of the L1 speech community. So for example, if I stay in L1 while I developing my target language, so I might not need to develop more language content, so it will keep me in the smaller range because I have less need to communicate with the other learners. So that is the time I can develop my interlanguage. And Selinker stresses that there are differences between interlanguage development in SLA and fast language acquisition. So it can be different the way we develop our interlanguage whenever we are referring as second language acquisition or target language acquisition, and our fast language acquisition. As a child, the language learner develops fast language, but as an adult learner, the learner develops the target language, which can be referred as second language. So we can have difference between second language acquisition and fast language acquisition. So he mentioned 5 principal processes, the processes which can be introduced in interlanguage, and they are language transfer, overgeneralization of the target language rules, transfer of training, strategies of second language learning, and strategies of second language communication. So first one is language transfer. According to Odlin 1989, transfer is the influence resulting from similarities and differences between the target language and any other language that has been previously acquired. I mean, in one sense, it is very much easy. If you just understand the example. I am a Bangla language user, and Bangla is my first language. And whenever I will be trying to develop my second language, that means English language, I will take lots of the things from first language. Or in other words, I can say my first language will influence while I will be learning English or my second language. So that is what we are referring as language transfer. I can take the grammatical rules, I can take a sentence structure from L1 to my L2, and that transfer is referred as language transfer, and that transfer can be positive and negative as well. If it is same, I mean the rules, the structures which I am transferring from my L1, if those are same, then that will be considered as positive transfer because it will enhance my language learning of the target language. But it is not same. It is different comparing to the target language norms, target language rules. So it can be produce negative transfer, that means underproduction, overproduction, and production errors. So in these three stages, it can produce errors, and that errors will be referred as negative transfer. Overgeneralization of the target language rules. This is very interesting, I should tell you, because whenever the learners try to develop the language, they try to develop it in his or her way, and at the time they produce their own rules, and by doing that the learners actually overgeneralize the rules, overgeneralize the target language rules, and the process of extending the application of a rule is considered as overgeneralization. So learners use their own rules and they deviate and they shift from the target language rules, and that is the time they actually overgeneralize the target language rules. For example, if a learner understands that one can add ed after a verb to make it a past form, then he or she might overgeneralize it and produce like this one: I go or I guided. Now you know that I worked to produce forms like I got, I worked. This is a very correct form, but if you can produce or generate more forms following this one, and you can come up with this one, I got or I write it. If you have overgeneralized the target language rules, it is a rule, yes, you can use ed to make it a past form, but if you overgeneralize it, you will face challenges, and that is the time you will develop interlanguage. If you have these kinds of structures in there, these kinds of overgeneralization in new language. Transfer of training. According to Richards 1972, in a foreign language setting where the major source of the input for English is the teaching manual and the teacher, the concept of transfer of training may be a basic analytic approach, since many of the errors observable are directly traceable to the manner of presentation of the language features in the school course. For example, you have admitted yourself in a situation where you are trying to learn English language, and in that procedure your instructor or your teacher gives you some instructions, some rules, and by learning those rules, by having those rules, by internalizing those rules, you have developed new language. So while you are preparing or developing new language, you use those rules which you gathered or acquired or earned through the training, and that is what we are referring as transfer of training. But in there, if you have the lack of formal instruction, or you can result it in interlanguage, because the result of initial learning process on the performance of the later activities can produce a different language. So in the meantime of learning your target language, if you lack the formal instruction, if you face challenges for transferring the training or the instruction, you can result of developing interlanguage. You can produce interlanguage. Strategies of second language learning, another process. According to Ellis 1985, attempts by the learners to control the range of the hypothesis he attempts to build at any single stage in his development by restricting hypothesis formation to those hypotheses which are relatively easy to form and will facilitate communication. First, let me tell you about hypothesis. Hypothesis is, we can configure it or we can rephrase it as intelligent guess. Whenever we guess with some references, then we can consider it as hypothesis. When we will have some kind of knowledge in there, and we do not just guess it, we have some information in it, and by having this information we develop this one, then we can consider it as hypothesis. And whenever a language learner try to develop his or her language, he or she internalize some strategies, and the ways the learners approach the second language materials and the task of language learning is considered as the strategies. The learning strategy of hypothesis formation and hypothesis testing leads to the constant modification of interlanguage rules. So whenever they will be following the strategies to internalize the second language, he or she will be trying to develop or modifying the rules of target language, and definitely that is the time you will be developing interlanguage rules as well. That is the time you will be developing his or her target language and interlanguage as well. Strategies of second language communication. This actually happens when the learner starts communicating. I have seen many people who have started learning English language, and whenever they have found some foreigners or some native speakers of English language, they try to communicate with them to identify the level of English language. So we are talking about that strategies. So the ways that learners try to communicate with others in the second language. For example, whenever I started learning second language, I tried to communicate with my teachers, with my classmates, with my friends, and that is the time I developed some kinds of rules or some kinds of interlanguage. So that is the strategies I'm talking about. Communication strategies underlying interlanguage behavior are used by learners when they are faced with production problems in the target language. Whenever I tried to produce second language target language, sometimes I forgot the proper words, proper dictions, proper vocabularies, proper sentence structures. So that is the time I changes the target language rules in order to communicate. Frederick and Kessler characterize communication strategies as being potential contrast acts. Potential contrast acts. So that means they are referring as communication strategies as what can be used or applied during communication. So that is referred as potential contrast acts, and that you can find in Ellis 1995. So I would like you to get yourself ready to write, because I will be instructing to write something, and that will be only a word. So please get ready. Just give it a pause here, and bring you copies and pen to write something down. So if you need some more time, just give it just hit the pause button and bring out all your pens and paper, because you need to write something down. So are you ready? You will get only 5 seconds to write it. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Write grammar. 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hope that you have already written it now. So that is the correct spelling of grammar. I don't know what you have done, but in my traditional classroom, I have found many students have distinctions, and one of the common distinctions is GRAMMER. So rather than producing A, some of them produce E. I don't know whether you have done it or not. If you have done it, please let me know in the forum that you have written GRAMMER as the spelling of grammar. Of course, there can be other spelling mistakes as well. Maybe 1M or 2M in there. Maybe you can produce both E and A there. Maybe you can produce U there, GRAMMER in there. But this is the common mistake I have found in my traditional classroom. So if you have written this one, then your one is correct. But why have I brought it at this moment? Because you have learned this particular word and have seen this particular word from the very beginning of your educational career. That means from the early stage, from the class 1. If you have still the problem in the spelling, that means you have internalized the spelling with E, and that is what we are referring as fossilization. Many second language learners, and that is more than 95%, fail to reach target language competence, and that is what said by Selinker. They fail to reach the target language continuum. They fail to reach the target language path because they stop learning when the interlanguage contains different rules than the target language system. So let me draw the diagram again. You are in here L1 and you want to reach in L2. In the meantime, you need to pass these stages, and these stages can be referred as interlanguage. So more than 95% people fail to reach here. That's why they are staying in the interlanguage continuum, and whenever they are staying here, definitely there are some rules they are developing which is not the same in target language. And if the learners producing those rules in there, then he or she will be referred as fossilized. That means his or her knowledge has stuck in that particular point. So fossilization occurs in most target language learners and cannot be remedied by further instruction. So you cannot be remedied in further instruction, because fossilized structures can be realized as errors or as correct target language forms. So if you have developed correct target language forms, then it will be fine, but if you have different target language forms, it will be referred as errors. But however, in some occasions the learners may succeed in producing correct target language form. So they may be able to develop correct target language forms, but when the learner is focused on meaning, he or she will be backslide towards his or her true interlanguage norm. So that means, as maybe when I say that before writing grammar, you need to concentrate on A or E. You need to concentrate whether that is A or that is E. That is the time you will be more conscious and you can be successful to produce a correct spelling with A. But whenever you will be writing a sentence or a passage having the word grammar, you might face the challenge. So that's what we are referring as backslide to his or her true interlanguage norm. So if you have done if you have not developed your interlanguage, then that means you will be stuck in that fossilized form. But don't worry, if you do not stop learning the second language, definitely you have the chance not to be fossilized. So that's all. So these are the references I was talking about. Definitely I have uploaded the pages is there, so you can have it to have more knowledge in there. So if you have any questions on there, please do ask in the forum. I will be there and join there. And thank you very much. Please join in the forum, please raise the question in there. And I would like to thank you from core of my heart if you are here, because you have done it. You have been successfully listened what is there from the first slide to this one. So I believe this all knowledge will be helpful for all of you for learning English language, because now you know what are the things you need to learn, what are the issues you need to concern about during learning while learning a language. So lots of the issues you have already learned. Now whenever you will be learning English language, you will be taking these as a concern, which will help you to learn English language or any other language which you will be trying to learn in future. So thank you very much for all your effort, and I would love to know about your comments on this particular slides in the forum. Thank you again.